that camera and strap in. It's time for another episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news and tips, along with your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus Visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, good Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining me for the live YouTube edition of TOGCHAT. Hey, as always gang, before we get going, do me a favor, just a quick solid here. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. We gotta get the word out, gotta let people know that we're here, right? So as always, nothing's changed. You can do two things. You can click that share button down underneath the video there, or you can go ahead and you can share the link. I'm putting it in the chat window here, tog.chat/live. So there you go, you guys have it. Please spread the word, let people know. And already we got people tuning in here from like all over the place. Caleb's here from Austin. I got Rick from Connecticut, Jim from Maine. I got Ron from Houston, Tina from Washington State, Anthony from Virginia. It's always cool to see where people are showing up from and tuning in from. So please leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. And of course, questions. Don't have a lot of questions lined up tonight, so this could be an interesting one, right? But seriously, I'm here for an hour. I want to help you improve your photography. What questions, what topics, what problems can we solve tonight? So go ahead, type those questions in. I will do my best to answer all of your questions in the next 60 minutes. One quick little piece of business before we get in too far. I am just going to switch the screen over here to my website really quick. And I want to let you guys know a lot of you that attend TOGCHAT have asked about this and questions many, many, many times. It's here. It's happening. You're going to be able to get it all. So if you visit my website and you click on the Events and Presentations tab. So first of all, tomorrow night, I've got a webinar, Powerful Color, all about using cool color and creative gels. So you might want to check that out. In fact, let me go ahead and get you guys the URL to that one here. Okay, I'll put that in the chat window for you. And there's that one, but that's not the one I wanted to tell you about. First of all, there's like 11 different webinars coming up over the next 3 months. You should check them out. But here's the one that everybody's been asking for on August 11th. So it's a little over a month away, 40 days away. Shoot prep, how to plan a great shoot. Great photography requires excellent preparation, and this is all of it. This is the one where I am going to walk you through start to finish. How do I find my models? How do I communicate with my models? How do I plan my shoot? How do I communicate all of that with the model? How do I make sure that models never flake on my shoots? Ever. How do I find my makeup artist? How do I communicate with my makeup artist? How do I communicate during the shoot with what I want? All of it. And attendees at this webinar will get downloads included as part of the webinar of my prep document that I talk about all the time. All the information I give the models to prepare for a shoot. They will also get copies of the email templates that I use to communicate back and forth with the models and the makeup artists, as well as copies of the model releases that I use. This is going to be a small group presentation. It will be interactive and it will be live. It is not recorded. So you have been forewarned. Don't wait until it sells out. Get yourself signed up. There's all the details. You got them, okay? All right, so I have got a couple questions already in the queue. Let's go ahead and get those out of the way. These are questions that came in a little bit earlier today in my Facebook group, so I'll take care of those. And then I see that we have a couple, sounds like my mic camera's picking up audio. Am I seeing that here? Oh, you know what? Sorry, guys. That should have just taken that out. Who made that? Sammy, let me know if that just changed things. That should have taken care of that. Thanks for that. Good heads up there. So, that being said, questions. let's start with the ones that I got in early. I have plenty of time though, so if you've got questions, if you've got topics, that's why we're here. Type them. Let's go. All right. So the first one here is a question from Tina. She photographed a rose petal with water drops on it and didn't notice it at the time, but she sees that she has no spectral highlights in the water drops in her shot. She used a softbox, and she wants to know if that would have resolved the issue. So Tina, actually, I think you kind of asked that question a little bit backwards, but the answer is a softbox would have limited the spectral highlights because the softbox is massive in relationship to the water drop. So it's going to, no change in the audio. That's interesting. Sorry guys, let me just make sure here, because it's, with him saying that he's getting something else, there should be nothing else feeding here at all. Yeah, I mean, that's it right now. You're down to one mic. That's the only thing that's feeding in here. So, so Tina, the bigger the light source, obviously the softer the light. So that's going to take out those little tiny hot highlights that you're looking for in the water drop. That does indeed give the water drop depth. Okay, so you know it's kind of about finding a balance when you're doing like macro shots like that. Softbox, the idea of using kind of a broader light is not bad, but you might want to use a much smaller softbox. If you follow macro photographers like Chris McGinnis, who is an Olympus macro shooter that does amazing stuff, he tends to mount a little oval diffuser over the front of his camera lens and then put a speed light through it. So it's giving him a softer light, but it's still small enough that it's going to pick up those highlights in the areas where you want to have highlights. So that's just a little bit of practice, a little bit of trial and error kind of situation, Tina. But yes, softbox, a traditional like a portrait softbox, would have wiped out any spectral highlights that you would get in that situation. All right, from Joel, this is an interesting question. So he's currently working on a project of shooting a portrait of every one of his grandparents' children, grandchildren, and grandchildren. So it's 35 people in all, and this is in France. He's shooting it with his grandfather's film camera. Casual portraits, outside, open shade. His question is regarding exposure. He's getting good results, and he's going on to say that he knows that I no longer shoot film, but in terms of the number of frames that you shoot and knowing that you kind of got the shot, are there things that I used to do differently kind of back in the day? And then he goes on to say, having no screen, I guess I have to be confident in what I saw at the moment and choose to press the button. So there's a couple things there, Joel. With regards to, let's just talk about exposure and shall we say, in terms of like how good are your exposures? With practice, you become very, very confident. Shooting film all the time, I rarely ran into a situation where I blew the exposure. And I frequently didn't bother actually paying attention to my meter. I had trained myself and learned to be able to identify, like, this is the exposure, set it, use it, boom, done. That takes a lot of practice and a lot of experience, right? So I'm not saying that everybody should be able to do that, please. I'm just saying that, yeah, newspaper photographers back in the day, the very first thing that would break on your camera, it was the light meter, because the light meters were mounted up in the pentaprism on the top. In fact, my very first camera light meter was mounted on the outside of the camera. So you just, you learn to work through that and you learn to get good at it. With regards to, how many frames would I shoot, even back in the film days, I was a heavy shooter. Now, not as heavy as I am now in the digital days, indeed, but I was a heavy shooter. Part of the way that I offset the costs involved in doing that is I would bulk load my own film. I believe you still can for some manufacturers now, but you used to be able to buy film in 100-foot rolls. And then basically you would have this thing called a daylight film loader. and you would put the film in. You would use reusable canisters, a little piece of masking tape. You tape the film to the end of the canister, and then each crank was one frame of film, and you would bulk load your own film. Cut the cost down significantly because you were reusing the metal canisters and you were actually loading them, right? So I still tended to shoot heavy. I've always been a heavy shooter. I'm not a spray and pray ever, but I've always been a heavy shooter. With regards to your last statement, I guess you have to be confident in what you saw at the moment that you choose to press a shutter. Yes, absolutely. I will give you guys an interesting little tip. Now, this doesn't apply for mirrorless cameras anymore. So if you're a mirrorless shooter, just tune this out, blah, 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 because it doesn't apply to you, right? But if you're a DSLR shooter or a film shooter, so it does apply with digital. So if you're working with a DSLR, single lens reflex, or a film camera, this applies. One of the coolest lessons that I learned early in my photography career from one of my mentors, and it was during some conversations about learning sports photography, okay? And it was basically that when you're shooting sports, if you see the moment through the lens, let's say it is a wide receiver catching the pass or a baseball batter hitting the ball, that moment. If you see it, you didn't photograph it. So think about that for a second. To be able to see it, it requires the mirror being down. So whatever the moment was that you were anticipating and trying to record, if you saw it happen, you didn't record it. You missed it. So the challenge, of course, in shooting film and shooting, DSLRs, digital, is that you're anticipating action, you're trying to time to grab the shot, but you're also realizing that in the exact moment, if you actually see it happen, you didn't get it. So you actually are trying to do this, and kind of the goal is to actually not see that moment. So indeed took a lot of practice, okay? So that being said, Joel, and honestly, it sounds like a really cool project. I wish you a lot of luck with it. I think when it's done, especially, it'll be really neat for your family to have that. It's awesome. So, all right, next up here from Gabe. Do I have an easy explanation to what makes a good portrait photo, or maybe a mental checklist for creating one? So that's actually very much two different questions, but what makes a good portrait photo, Gabe? Well, actually, both questions. I would suggest that you're kind of asking the wrong questions and looking for the wrong answers. What I mean by that is, and you guys should know by now, right? It goes back to much simpler things. So what makes a good portrait photo starts with the answer to a much simpler question, right? You can't start with that question, what makes a good photo? Because if you're asking another photographer to answer the question, what makes a good portrait photo, you're going to get all the wrong advice. Number one, because you're going to get it through their eyes. It's not a textbook answer that applies to every portrait. The answer begins with the answer to a different question, and that question is, why are you taking the portrait? A portrait is not a portrait is not a portrait. A portrait depends on what is the point behind a portrait. What is it for? Is it going to hang on the wall in somebody's house? Is it going to be used in a piece of marketing? Is it a promotional image? It could be any one of hundreds of possibilities. So when somebody says to you, Gabe, hey, I need a portrait, your first question, your response should be not, okay, cool, I can do it. Your question should be, why? What's it for? That now determines the next questions that you will ask, which the answers to those next questions also then help determine if it is a good portrait. So there's a bunch of criteria that has to go into this, right? So once you know the why, then you're going to start asking questions. Let's just say that it's a realtor and they need it for their business cards, for their signs that go in front of the houses, and for their website. Okay. So now we need to know things like, well, what color background do you need this on? Do we have to match any colors based on, like, are you a Real Max realtor who uses red, white, and blue for their colors? Or Berkshire Hathaway that uses purple for their colors, right? So we need to understand, okay, how is this going to fit in with other elements? All of those pieces build into the final determination of, is this a good portrait photo? Okay. Simpler, more generic kind of rule of thumb. You want a person to look confident, comfortable, relaxed, and generally happy. But even that, not always, right? So with regards to the mental checklist, yeah, and I do have an older video, and the worst part of it is I, for the life of me, cannot remember. This is really bad that I can't remember which video of my own that it's in, where I actually break down that whole thought process. Let me just see if I can find it really quick here, and I will share the link. If not, Gabe, you're a member of my mentor group. I will be able to help you out with that. Oh, yeah, here it is, right there. Gosh, that was much easier to find than I thought it would be. Okay, so let me give you the link to this. And this is the video that you want to watch. This is basically going to answer your question in a lot more detail. Okay? So, yeah, start with that, Gabe, and that'll help you out. But be careful about looking for a definition of what makes a good portrait photo, because there's many definitions, and it all goes back to the why. So, all right, one more question here that came in early from Sammy. I'm right on the edge of getting my dog photography business started. Awesome, congratulations. What type of software do you use to perform transactions digitally? Things such as sending and signing contracts, invoices, and delivering final images. So myself, I don't need to use any of those at this point in my career, Sammy, but I can give you a couple good recommendations. Number one, I would recommend taking a look at 17hats.com. So it's the number 17hats.com. And I would also recommend looking at another platform called Honeybook, HONEYBOOK, honeybook.com. I think that you will find both of those to be very vibrant in terms of feature sets, offerings, capabilities, everything that they will do for you in that sense. And that's exactly what they are. They are what's called a SaaS solution, software as a service or software as a solution. You can do it either way. Basically, they are online programs that allow you to do contact management, lead generation, sending out emails, creating invoices, billing, accepting payments, all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of them out there. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, so I would encourage you to do some research, but those are two that I know are very popular in the photography community. I have sampled both of them, and both of them, honestly, are really brilliant programs with great tools and capability built in. So you really kind of want to go through them and give yourself a little bit of kind of a side-by-side feature comparison. And then pretty much all of those tools, Sammy, including Honeybook and 17 Hats, they all have usually like a 14-day or a 30-day free trial. So, it's a little bit of extra work, but it's worth signing up for the free trial, taking the time to kind of get things set up, try it out, see how it works. Before you make a commitment, because none of that stuff is cheap, right? This is stuff that makes a lot of sense if you're running a business, if you're actually making money as a photographer. But if you're just, doing things for hobby's sake, then obviously you're not going to want to spend for these programs. So before you get and it's always cheaper to pay for them for a year at a time as opposed to paying for the monthly rates, right? So it's worth putting in a little bit of energy and effort in advance, figuring out which is the best one, and then go with it. And honestly, when you do that, my advice is, once you make your pick, you kind of got to put blinders on and stop looking at all the other opportunities, because there are so many different options. I went through this recently and had to remind myself of my own advice when all the shutdowns started to happen with the viruses and that. When I started doing my online presentations, I was trying out all different webinar platforms, and I mean, it literally was overwhelming. And unfortunately, I wound up having two really, really bad experiences where I had to literally just harass the heck out of the companies and get my credit card company involved to get my money refunded because there were problems with the way they described their services and what they were actually offering. And in the one case, you couldn't actually find that out in the free trial, because in the free trial they limited some of the services. So, some of the services you couldn't actually access until you paid for it. So it was a nightmare. And ultimately, once you make your decision, it's better put blinders on, and just go for it. But put in the research in advance, because that was the bad lesson that I learned with the webinar stuff. I didn't properly compare them all. I was in a rush to get some classes out and get going. So I jumped in. And then, I was having to backpedal. And so, like, my first 3 webinar, online classes that I did were each on a different platform because I was trying to, get it all worked out. Finally, when I found the company that I'm with now, I absolutely love what they do. And even then, they're not perfect, but they check off more boxes than anybody else. They do it at a very reasonable rate. So, okay. All right. And good luck with your business. I will look forward to hearing more about that along the way. All right, so I am into the chat wall now. Let's see what we've got here. Scrolling on down. And so Anthony Thomas here asked me, and Anthony, I'm still not going to be able to give you what you want, not in a talk chat. Potential topic, targeted marketing. So I want you to understand, targeted marketing is one of those buzzwords, folks. Don't get yourself too hung up in it. So I asked him, well, be more specific. He told me targeted marketing logistics with a specific social media platform. Anthony, that still doesn't help me, because I don't care about the platform. What I really want to know is who you're targeting. And you can't say potential customers. What kind of potential customers? What kind of photography are you marketing? What are you trying to sell? Like why are you targeting? Why are you even putting in that effort? And what I also want to know is, what are you doing now that's not working, right? So, that's a challenge. And then he did add for me, selling photography services, product targeting. In other words, which social media platform targets what demographic. So first of all, that's a super easy Google search. And it's a Google search that's worth doing, and not listening to some guy on YouTube, because while I'm really good at marketing and while I know most of this stuff, the fact of the matter is it actually changes over time. And I can guarantee all of you, when it comes to marketing, if you're looking at kind of statistical information of what you should be doing, in the last 3 months, the whole freaking world has changed, folks. Right? So first of all, right now is not the time to be doing targeted marketing, because targeted marketing usually has a dollar sign attached to it. Let's just be really clear. Now, in terms of, well, where am I better off putting my pictures to market myself? That's not targeted marketing, guys. That's just not. It's not what targeted marketing is. Okay, so. If you want to break it down, okay, for weddings, you need to be on Pinterest, and you're going to deal with Facebook. And Instagram is a really, really tight third with that, okay? Portraits, depends on what kind of portraits you're doing, right? If you're doing business work and real estate stuff and all that kind of stuff, well, then you need to be on LinkedIn, maybe on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all those worthless, okay? If you're a landscape guy, you're shooting wildlife, or you're hoping to sell wall art, well, number one, it's going to be Pinterest, hands down, but with a very close follow-up on Instagram and Facebook. But it's not about being on that platform. And that's why, Anthony, like you're saying, well, which platforms do I use? The platform doesn't matter. What matters is, who are you targeting on the platform? So I just said, like, if somebody's doing landscapes and wildlife and they want to, sell wall art, they should be on Pinterest, they should be on Facebook, they should be on Instagram. If you just stop listening there and go do that, you'll be wasting tons of time. So if you're that landscape guy or the wildlife guy and you want to do that, you're going to be on those platforms. You're going to be targeting interior designers, interior decorators. Those are the people that you want to be targeting. The people that are staging homes, that are working with realtors, that are actually purchasing more wall art than anyone else, and who have the ability to recommend your wall art to their clients. So that's why you got to be careful with buzzwords in marketing. And believe me, I'm a marketing nerd, but people get caught in these buzzwords and like, I need to worry about who I'm targeting. Well, no, you don't need to worry about who you're targeting, because you shouldn't be doing any advertising until you know who the heck you're targeting. And then it's not about targeting, it's about where are those people? That's it. So be careful about how you get caught up in the buzzwords. You're just going to spend, a lot of time chasing your tail, and that's ultimately going to turn into a lot of money, because once you start throwing those words around, people are going to start pushing you towards paid ads, and it's just not worth it. So stay tuned for another online presentation I have coming up in the fall that is a more detailed, kind of practical, day-to-day social media approach that you might find will be helpful in that kind of area. Okay. All right. Let's see, from Tim here. Using a GX8 Micro Four Thirds, need to get a small travel monolight for a larger group. Can I get by with 200 watt second light? I don't know, Tim. Can you? I'm sorry. I hate those questions. Tim, you got to understand, right? When you ask me a question like that, you already know, or at least you probably already know, I use Godox 8200s. I love them. I say all the time, I can freaking do anything with them, right? But it all depends on what your tolerance is for. Plus, it depends on how you want to light it. Plus, what's a larger group? Is a larger group 10 people? Is it 20 people? Is it 50 people? Is it 80 people? Is it 100 people? What is it, right? So, when you say, can I get by? Well, are you shooting them indoors? Are you shooting them outdoors? Are you going to put them in the shade? Are you going to put them in the sun and you need to fill? Or you want to overpower the sun? All of those things, what kind of lens are you going to use, right? So really what it comes down to is, a 200 watt second light. If you go back and you review the inverse square law, which is what you should do anyway, all of you should do, because you're freaking kidding yourselves if you're not. You're never going to master lighting. You will never, none of you. This isn't picking on Tim. This is all of you that are here. Right? If you don't know that inverse square law concept inside out and backwards, you're kidding yourself. You just are. It's kind of like depth of field. If you think depth of field is bokeh, all right? If you think ISO is the sensitivity in your sensor, you're kidding yourselves. That's not how it works. So, that being said, Tim, you got 35 folks for me. That's cool. How are we shooting them? Indoors, outdoors? We shoot with a wide angle lens? We shoot with a telephoto lens? Because I don't know how close you're going to be to those 35 people. All that's going to determine, is 200 watt seconds enough? Because obviously light falls off as it travels. So I need to know that, I need some more context. So give me some more details, and I'll look for them. I'll come back and look at them. But I need to know, what kind of distance you're going to shoot, indoors, outdoors, all that kind of stuff. Are you using ambient light with it? Are you trying to kill the ambient light? What are you trying to do? Okay? All right. Manny, can the Color Gels live event be available after that? I have something planned and can't cancel at the last moment. If you register, it is recorded and will be available for 48 hours, 2 days. So an email gets sent out about 2 hours after the event, and you will be able to watch the whole recording. And it's recorded in kind of a split screen, so even when I am showing the software that the online software that I use to kind of demonstrate the lighting techniques and all that kind of stuff, you'll still be able to, see me and see what I'm talking about and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that is an option. And it will come up again, the gel one, Manny, will come up again one more time in the fall. So, for those of you that have been following along, basically each of these webinars, I'm going to present them 3 times. Most of them. So that's not a guarantee. I'm just telling you, my game plan is to basically present them 3 times over the course of about a 6-month period, and then they're done. They're retired. As I'm preparing them, I'm also doing them in such a way that when we ever get to the post-COVID-19 world, I will be able to present these presentations live in front of camera clubs and trade shows and events and things like that. So one of the first things you learn as a content creator is if you can't repurpose your content, you shouldn't be creating it. So yes, I'm basically, some of these classes have come from camera club talks that I've done before, and then I've turned them into a better presentation. And others I'm doing from scratch, but designing them in a way that with very little effort I can turn around and I can do that as a live presentation. So the game plan is going to be 3 times, and that's it. Could change, but I do have more to come that I'm planning and working on. Actually, quite a few more that I'm working on in terms of topics and things like that. There will be one on the inverse square law. There will be one on depth of field. And the folks that are here that attended my exposure talk a week or so ago will attest to the fact that they learned some things that are extremely contrary to the general thought process. Things like the exposure triangle being a complete ridiculous waste of time. Don't bother learning it. It has no value to you at all. It's a memorization technique that does not teach you anything about photography at all, period. The fact that correct exposure is completely subjective, and the fact that ISO is not a sensitivity setting. ISO is a lighter and darker setting. That's all it is on digital cameras. If you're shooting film, ISO is still all about sensitivity. But in a digital camera, ISO is really meaningless. Okay, so anyway, these are not your normal camera club talks, I assure you. These are talks that are going to make you think. They're going to introduce you to concepts and thoughts that you have never dealt with before, and they get into the legit, let's make it work. Okay, so Tim, I've got 35 folks, unknown locations, more than likely outside. So right out of the box, I would tell you, for 35 people working with one light, you're kidding yourself. So that's a problem. The spread on one light to cover 35 people, by the time you back it up far enough to do that, 200 watt seconds, you're going to be losing a lot of power. And even to go with a 600 watt second head, I can't tell you that's the right thing, Tim, because it comes down to, well, are you going to be diligent enough in your location selection to at least have the sun behind people so you're filling it? Or are you going to have the sun behind you, in which case you need to basically match or overpower it? Your answer is not that simple. And anybody that gives you an answer that simple, Tim, is basically not helping you. Let me be really, really clear. Unfortunately, you're approaching it unrealistically, and not with enough understanding of making your light work. Okay, so you're gonna need at least 2 lights, unless you're gonna go super powerful and back it way up. Remember, light spreads. Right? So that's the whole point. You've got to look at your light. You've got to look at the power of your light. You've got to understand the inverse square law to understand how fast, how far does it spread. And at that distance where it's going to cover my 35 people, what kind of exposure am I going to get out of that 200 watt seconds? In all reality, in a bright sunny day, 200 watt second strobe with 35 people, if you are going to use that to try and cover all 35 people, it's not going to work. It's really not going to do anything for you, not unless you can get that whole group into the shade. So if it were me, I would want at least 2 strobes, and then I would probably want to shoot with a wide angle lens. You can't go too wide or you're going to take your group and start keystoning it, but I want to shoot with a wide angle lens. I'd want to get fairly close to them. Okay, and understand too that, and I hear you about wanting to try and travel light and everything, but when you get big groups like that, one of the easiest and best cheats, both in terms of making your group shot look visually interesting and making your lighting easier, follow along. You need to take a step ladder, preferably like a 6-foot step ladder. You can get 6-foot aluminum step ladders, they're not real heavy, right? But you take a step ladder with you, you set your group up, and then you go at least halfway up the step ladder so you're slightly above the group, shooting down. Now that's with regards to you and your camera. What you've done by doing that is you've got everybody looking up slightly. So they're looking up at the sky, which even on a cloudy day, better light, right? And you're reducing the amount of situations and scenarios where somebody's going to be behind another person because you're starting to come down in the group. And then with your lighting, what you do is you make sure that you have 12-foot stands. And you put your lights up really high. So the idea is, if here's the group, so you're going to have to imagine group row 1, row 2, row 3, right? Here's your lights. You want your lights up high enough so that you're basically angling down on your 1, 2, 3 rows instead of having all your light coming at the front row. Because with 35 people, Tim, depending on how you're going to compose them as a group, you could have 4 or 5 rows of people. Well, if all your lights out here and you're coming straight at them, then your problem is you're going to have like a full stop fall off from the front row to the back row, okay? So, Tim, I fly with a full 4-light studio all the time. I've shown my kit here. It's actually in a video on YouTube. Yeah, the flying part's not the end of the world. I fly with 4 lights, stands, umbrellas, triggers, mag mods, the whole bit. So, yeah, I mean, you can fly with that stuff, okay? But honestly, it sounds like for what you're wanting to do, you need to pay more attention to your location and your situation and not use lights. Because it sounds like you don't want to have to deal with, lights. But unfortunately, it's, that's the balance, right? So, but I'll tell you right now, Tim, do yourself a big favor and don't spend money renting lights until you really work through these things. If you think you're going to get somebody to answer you the questions of how to make this lighting thing work, and then you're going to go pull it off, dude, you're in way over your head. Trust me, from somebody that's screwed up plenty of pictures over the years, you're in way over your head, okay? You need to get a better grasp on what you're doing with your lighting. My advice is stick with what you know. You work with a natural light, you keep it simple, you pay attention to your lighting. Because if that scares you, then that says to me getting strobes is even worse. Because the only reason it would scare you would mean that you're not confident at being able to walk into a situation and find good light, which is every photographer's job. Just being honest, man. So, if you're not confident doing that, trying to add lights into that when you're not even clear on what lights, how many lights you need, or any of that kind of stuff, you are basically just begging to blow that entire scenario. Work with a natural light. If you're shooting outdoors, work with a natural light. It's going to be a lot simpler. It just will, okay? And especially if you take me up on my stepladder thing, which, you don't have to travel on a plane with a stepladder. Stepladders are everywhere. Everybody's got stepladders. Have somebody bring one. You put in a little bit of effort, you work ahead, you have people bring stepladders, all right? And that way, cloudy, overcast day, you're up 6 feet, shooting down, the light on the faces, perfect. Bright sunny day, no problem, okay? You're up 6 feet, same deal. Put the sun behind the people, or better yet, get them into the shade. Boom, done. Perfect light every time. Just makes life so much easier. In situations like that, especially, shade is your best friend. Never forget it. That's why that video I have, in fact, here it is right here. How to shoot great portraits in bright sunlight. I'll share the link with you guys. If you watch the video, I will give you the joke in advance. It's a video about how to shoot great portraits in bright sunlight. I think there's 6 different scenarios, 5 or 6 different scenarios in the video. Every one of them, I've got the model in shade. That's how you shoot great portraits in bright sunlight. Shade. Done. Okay? It just makes life so much easier. Okay? All right. Scroll on down here. Alvin. Oh, gosh. All right, Alvin. Dutch angle. When and where to use it. What subjects work better with a Dutch angle to create a mood? I don't know. I don't care. So let me explain, all right? A Dutch angle, basically, gang, it's a tilt, like an aggressive tilt. It's used in the movies. It's a movie-making term. It's used to help create mood and attitude, okay? Let me give you the explanation of why I responded that way, Alvin. And once again, I only teach from my experience. I have little to no respect for people that claim to know things they don't do, or that they don't know or don't have experience with, okay? So I've talked about this in terms of composition before, which is not, composition isn't really Dutch angle, but bear with me, you'll understand, because you've probably heard me tell this story. When I was a teenager, got my first camera and was starting to learn photography and kind of caught the bug. I was a smart kid. I very diligently went to the library and I took out books from the library on exposure and depth of field and composition and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn everything there was to learn. I wanted to know it all. Boom. So this is 1971, 1972 era, okay? All of the books on photography back then, they were like thicker than the Bible. They were all in black and white. There was no color in any of these books. And most of them were actually written in the 1950s and 60s. So they're brutal. And they were all highly technical. So, the very first composition book that I got, somebody had told me that, it was important. Learn composition. It's going to make your pictures better. They'll be more visually interesting, all this stuff. So I start to open up this book and I start to go through this book. And it's rule after rule after rule after rule. And we're talking about rule of thirds and Fibonacci spirals. And then it's getting into how you have to use diagonals and, negative space and all this stuff. And I got through about the first chapter and maybe half of the second chapter. And I just packed it in with the book, took it back to the library. I was like, okay, so apparently I'm going to suck at photography. Because the reality was, I realized, here was my my 12-year-old evaluation of this, which I still maintain today. In fact, I maintain it even more aggressively today because now I know the science is on my side. But my thought process at 12 years old, after reading through this first chapter, which is basically the setup for the book, right? This is where it's basically telling you, these are all the things you're going to learn. My thought process was, if I have to remember all this stuff, if I ever do manage to remember all this stuff, I'm never going to get around to pressing the freaking button. Because I'm going to look at what's in front of me and be like, okay, so should I use a diagonal? Should I use negative space? Should I use a Fibonacci spiral? Should I use rule of thirds? Like, what the heck should I use? Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, that was my thought process. So the beauty of it is, fast forward 40-some years, science proves that that's a dumbass way to learn. Number one, because it's memorization. Memorization is not learning. That's the whole thing with the exposure triangle. It doesn't work. So the reason why I respond that way, Alvin, with the idea of like, well, so a couple things. Number one, does it bother me if a photographer doesn't know what the hell a Dutch angle is? No, not even in the slightest. Do I think less of that photographer? No, I actually think more of them because they are not burdened with that knowledge of why and when you're supposed to tilt the camera. Like, I think that's ridiculous. I just do. So, if you were a film major and you were learning about film history and all that kind of stuff, yeah, you're going to have to learn about Dutch angles but then you're also learning about it in the context of how certain directors use them more than others and why they use them and how they use them. Not to sound artsy-fartsy, Alvin, and this is about as artsy-fartsy as you ever get me to sound, but I use a Dutch angle when it feels right. But I assure you, at no point ever am I saying to myself or thinking to myself, wow, this Dutch angle looks really good. No, it's a freaking tilt. That's it. It's a tilt. Okay? I have one rule of thumb with tilts. If you're going to tilt the camera, tilt the doggone camera. In other words, this looks like crap. This is creative, right? But, this is usually like, why is the camera tilted? This is making a statement and can alter the mood and change it. Basically, Dutch angles are canted angles. That's, if you want to use the technical phrase, that's a technical phrase, folks. But, I would basically recommend, honestly, not learning that stuff because it really does. It puts you in a creative box. Because then you've also, once you learn about it, you also have a set of rules that go with it about when you're supposed to use it and when you're not supposed to use it. And that, then you're fighting to do something that's creative and unique. When we talk about composition, gang, it's, and I know this is not this is not going to give you a definitive, your right answer. And I know that a lot of you struggle with that. I understand that. But if you really want to be good, you're going to have to learn to work within that space of there is no rule. Because the problem of it is the greatest photographs, the greatest photographers are not working with those rules. They're doing stuff that hasn't been seen before. They're doing stuff that is truly unique. They're thinking not outside a box. They're thinking oblivious to the box. And it is a situation when you talk about, for instance, composition. Ignorance is bliss. It truly is. It is opportunity. However, what can we say about composition? Well, we can say some obvious things. But yet for everything I'm going to say, we can also find exceptions. So, to me, good composition is an image that only includes the things that I want it to include. So you notice it doesn't talk about anything about placement, but it has to do with the content, right? And the reason why I associate that with composition, me personally, is sometimes it's a matter of, well, I'm framing my shot. I like that. Ooh, but you know what? I don't like that tree on the edge of the frame. If I move over to here and change my angle and alter my composition slightly, now that tree's gone. Whatever, right? So the two go hand in hand. Composition, to me, uses lines, objects, elements, or light to manipulate or control what the viewer of my image will see. So now in the course of that, do things like diagonal lines, negative space, and all that work? Yes, they do. But that doesn't mean when you're shooting, you're saying, oh, well, I should have negative space over here. No. It means you're looking and you're feeling. You're reacting to what's in front of you, and that's allowing you to make the adjustments, arrange things the way that you are. But I am not a big fan of worrying about that stuff. So yeah, if you're going through it, kind of purely academically, Alvin, knock yourself out. But in terms of when should you use it and when shouldn't you use it, I disagree with pretty much anything it says on the internet. Because that just means follow those rules and you'll do the same stuff that everybody's done before you. If that's what you want, then, that's certainly an option. Okay? Michael, manual TV or AV mode for street photography. It depends, man. It depends. It depends on, when you talk about street photography, are you shooting with telephoto lenses or are you shooting with wide angle lenses? Are you one of those people that likes to walk down the street with a camera, around your neck or at your side? You're not going to look through it. Or are you going to pick the camera up to your eye? All those things come in. Do you tend to shoot sedentary objects that aren't moving? Do you tend to shoot moving objects when you're shooting? Once again, it's kind of, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, man. I'm just being honest, guys. It's a lazy question to a really in-depth topic. And no, it is. I'm sorry. It's a lazy question, but in your defense, okay? So many people ask similar questions because what we want, and I get this part, I get it. We want the easiest answer with the best result. That doesn't necessarily give you good photography. Unfortunately, it doesn't, right? Because the fact of the matter is, aside from manual, right? So manual basically requires you to take the time on every image, which can get in the way of the spontaneity. Depends on the circumstances, right? So for a lot of street photographers, I don't think they're shooting I can't speak firsthand. I do know 2 street photographers that actually do brilliant work. I know them personally. I know their shooting habits. They do not shoot manual. That being said, when you get into automatic, you have to realize that it doesn't matter what, you could be on program. It doesn't matter. All automatics, the camera is still a machine. Walking down the street, going in and out of lighting situations, all those kinds of things, there are so many scenarios that can just throw the camera like completely off the scent of what is a good exposure. So you still need to be managing it to a degree. So now, all that being said, if, Michael, if I was going to go out and try street photography today, like if I was going out and saying, okay, I'm going to shoot street photography for the afternoon, what I would do for my style of shooting, let me start first by giving you the whole thought process leading up to the day, and then you'll understand why I'm picking my choice for exposure, okay? Because I want you to understand that the answer to your question, it involves actually the answers to many other questions. It's not as simple as just saying what kind of exposure. So if I had to go and do street photography tomorrow, I am the kind of shooter I would put, now remember, I'm shooting on an Olympus, okay? So I'm micro four thirds. It would not be this lens. I would actually go out with a 7-14. Now, a lot of people, if they were micro four thirds shooters, this would be their lens of choice. It's a 12 millimeter to 100 millimeter lens. So in full frame, that's 24 to 200 millimeters. So it's an incredible range. This would allow you to do wide angle street as well as telephoto street. But if it were me and I had to go do this, I would go out with my 7-14. So on full frame, that's a 14 to 28 millimeter wide angle lens. That lens right there would require me to interact with anyone that I photograph, meaning I would have to walk right up to them and essentially put the camera in their face. For me, that would be my approach to street photography. I would want to interact with my subjects. I would want to learn a little bit about my subjects. I would want to have their stories, who they are, what they're experiencing, what they're going through. I would want that to influence my decisions in terms of how I portrayed them and how I photographed them compositionally, exposure-wise, backgrounds, everything, expressions, everything. Some street photographers, of course, prefer to go out with telephoto lens and shoot from a block away, right? But I would go the wide angle. So knowing that I'm shooting with a wide angle lens, knowing that I'm still, since it's street photography, going to be going in and out of all kinds of really varying lighting situations, especially if it's a bright sunny day, I would in all likelihood go ahead and shoot auto ISO. Why would I do that? I would want to be able to determine in advance of shooting a subject, am I using a shutter speed that's going to be fast enough for stopping people that I've stopped and talked to on the street? So it's very unlikely I'm going to be photographing anybody running or jumping or doing anything like that, given that lens, given that style of shooting. So I would want to know my shutter speed works, and then I would want my aperture to be adequate, keeping in mind that I'm also using a super wide angle lens. So I've got a lot of depth of field built in. I'm not, and if I'm going to go out and do street, by the way, think gang, right? Doing street photography, you don't want to be doing a whole lot of f1.2 shooting with creamy bokeh backgrounds. Part of the idea with street photography is to show surroundings, okay? Give it a sense of place. So, I would want to be shooting probably around 5.6, 8, somewhere in there. My shutter speed, ideally if it's a bright sunny day, I'd probably set it around, 125 or 250. And then go to auto ISO and have my front dial set for exposure compensation. Since I'm shooting mirrorless, since I'm shooting with an EVF, that way, as I'm looking through the camera, all I've got to do is ride that exposure compensation dial. If the camera's making things a little too light or a little too dark, I'm just adjusting that, boom, I'm good to go, okay? Because remember, the auto ISO, it's not changing the sensitivity of your sensor. It's just making your picture lighter or darker. That's all it's doing. Indeed, the lighter it makes your picture, there is a quality loss. So you have to pay attention to it. But yeah, that would be my approach. But be careful about asking, hey, which is the best of those to do for street photography? Because that's such a broad, broad genre in terms of the styles of shooting, the ways to shoot it, that somebody could give you a very honest answer and set you off on a completely wrong path because their style of shooting and their taste is much, much different than yours. So, again, guys, I know I'm being really tough on people about context tonight, but it is. It's all about context, right? The most underused question by photographers underused is why. Right? All of you ask, like, you know, this one, or this one, or should I use this, or should I use that, or what do you think about this bit? It all comes back to why. If you know the whys, it's a lot easier to get to the finished answer because, folks, all good photography, it's problem solving, right? It's problem solving. So that's how it works. All right, let's see here. Anthony, have I used the Tether Tools Air Direct wireless tethering system? If so, what's your review thoughts on it? Mike Warren, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate the super chat. Thank you. Anthony, a true story. I'm a Tether Tools Tether Pro. I'm sponsored by them. I have one downstairs. It looks really, really awesome in the box. It arrived while I was in Florida the week before the lockdown. And I have not shot since. During the lockdown, as you guys know, in the beginning of the lockdown, I moved out of my studio and set up my studio back here at home. And then I've been preparing classes. And even though Pennsylvania is in the process of opening up, my studio is now my home. My wife is a high-risk candidate. I am not going to be bringing models and a makeup artist. And my makeup artist is also very high risk. She has a compromised immune system. So I'm not going to be shooting for a little while yet, unfortunately. I can tell you that based on everything I know about it, I got to play with it out in Las Vegas at WPPI. I did a booth demo for Tether Tools out there. Eric, thank you so much, man. Thank you. I did a booth demo for Tether Tools out there and got to test it out. It's awesome. For me, now also a little caveat here, so let me also explain why I haven't been like falling over myself to try and get it out and use it. Olympus has Wi-Fi tethering built in, right? So I actually don't need it, right? I'll be completely honest with you, what I'm excited about using it for, you can also use it essentially to Wi-Fi tether video. So pretty much right out I didn't figure it out, but pretty much right out of the box, there were a few photographers from the pro team that figured out they could actually use it to stream video for a live stream. So as I, get back into shooting, which is probably going to be another month or so, I will be using it in the studio for that purpose. So no, Anthony, sorry, you can't have mine, because I'm actually very excited about getting to use it. But here's the thing, though. I want to be really clear so you understand this, Anthony. So again, folks, I am sponsored by Tether Tools. I love their stuff. I will tell you that every piece of Tether Tools gear that I have, except for the Air Direct, I have actually purchased. Okay, so with that disclosure out there, I will tell you this: understand one thing about it, okay? And Tether Tools would actually probably prefer that I actually don't talk about this, but I'm being straight. It is an amazing device. It does everything that it is advertised to do, and it does it incredibly well. And the best part of it is you can use it on any camera that has, an HDMI out. But remember, it's still Wi-Fi. So I mentioned a moment ago that my Olympus cameras have Wi-Fi tethering built in. I don't use it. Now, if you're shooting products, Anthony, which I know you do some products, it would be fine. But Anthony, I believe you're a Canon or a Nikon shooter, if I remember correctly, right? Which means you're full frame, which means you're using pretty big files. So let me just give you a point of comparison. As an Olympus shooter at 20 megapixels, micro four thirds, a raw file via Wi-Fi, and this would, by the way, this would be the same with the Air Direct as it is with the camera, because it's the Wi-Fi that's the problem. Wi-Fi is the common denominator between the two, right? In other words, Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi. It's about 8 seconds from the time you go click to the time the file transmits and renders. And keep in mind, I'm rendering, since I'm shooting with Olympus, I'm rendering with Olympus Capture, which is 50% faster than Capture One. And Anthony, I know you're a Capture One user. So you add to that a bigger file from your full frame camera, plus the fact that you're using Capture One, which doesn't render as fast. And if you're using Lightroom, oh my God, even more painful, right? You're looking at probably at least 10 seconds from the time you press. Now, 10 seconds when we have a conversation, Doesn't sound that bad, right? But when you're in a studio, you've got a model in front of you or something like that, and you're trying to shoot, 10 seconds is like a freaking eternity waiting for the shot to come up so you can get back to your model. It totally like messes with your flow. But that is not the fault of the Olympus camera or the Tether Tools AirDirect. That is our current Wi-Fi technology. As Wi-Fi technology improves down the road, things will get faster. So, it's the pipe concept, right? The problem is the pipe's not big enough. As the pipe gets bigger, things will get faster. But right now, the pipe's not big enough. The Wi-Fi is it's slow. So for people doing product work, and even people doing portraits, if they're not type A like me, okay, it's awesome to not have cords. I mean, that's why I got rid of my Interfit lights in the studio and I went all with Godox, because I don't want cords and I love not having the cords. But yeah, the one cord that still lives in my studio and still gets used every time I do shoot, it is my bright orange Tether Tools cords, because I love the tether, but yeah, the Wi-Fi is just not there yet. And that's why I'm really excited about the AirDirect for being able to use it for video, because I can at least get a fast enough stream to make video work for live streaming out of it. So that, and that's not that I need to live stream, but I want to be able to do some handheld behind the scenes video without having to have, cords that running around. And I'd rather be able to record it direct into a recorder instead of on the camera discs, because then it's a lot more time and hassle for me downloading. So yeah, but everything that I have experienced myself, Anthony, and talked to people who use it, I know religiously, it lives up to all its promises. Really, 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 really great tool. So, but do understand the speeds that you're getting into before you jump into that, okay? Because unfortunately, that gets left out of the conversation a lot, and so let's see. Robert, met you in Ann Arbor. Awesome, man. Great to see you here. Thank you. So let's see. Josh Peters. Gosh, you clearly have not attended my Understanding Creativity class. You say that you don't apply rules like the Rule of Thirds, for example, but don't you have to know the rules so that you know the reason why you break the rules for the effect that it's creating? No. Josh, think about how stupid that is. I'm not calling you stupid. You're not the only photographer that says that, and I'm sure you heard that from another photographer. Okay? So forget the rules for a moment and just think about creativity. Creativity is thinking outside the box. Creativity is doing something that's unique, that's different, that's never been done before. Humans are lazy. We're all lazy. You're lazy. I'm lazy. The next guy's lazy. We're wired that way. We work as a species to make things simpler, faster, easier. We're lazy. Once you know the rules, you're in the box. You know all the things you're not supposed to do. So in order to be truly creative and think outside the box, one, you've got to be willing to not be lazy. You've got to work harder. You've got to basically fight your natural instinct to be lazy. You've got to fight against all the things you know you're supposed to do, which makes it 10 times harder. Truly creative people don't care about that stuff. Truly creative people, you can't tell them, this is the rule, don't do it. That's why they're so damn creative, because they are not encumbered. They are not burdened by those rules. So please, Josh, I'm sure, like I said, I know somebody told you that, but please do not be the photographer that walks around saying that. And please do not teach that to younger photographers, please. Because younger photographers have the luxury of not knowing any better. Let them. That's why photographers like me are becoming irrelevant. Because younger generation, they don't give a crap about the rules. They just don't. They create and they work and they do what they feel, whatever motivates them. And God, I wish I could be like them. I seriously do. But unfortunately, also part of being a human, I've got 40 plus years of all these habits and things stuck in my head. And that's why you guys see me do so many things, videos, classes, presentations, where I intentionally try to do things that we're not supposed to do. I intentionally try to do things that were told this doesn't work. Because I'm determined not to just give up and do boring, nice pictures. Nice is boring. Following the rules is boring. That's not what motivates me. So, yeah, no, I wish I didn't know the rules. I wish I had never learned the rules. Because the fact of the matter is that realization is in my head. And I have to fight against that every single time. So, okay. Let's see here. Orthus, I haven't grabbed my camera lately. I do portraits and during these times haven't been able to. I'm with you there. I understand. I've already done everything I can shoot inside, including self-portraits, but I'm fed up. Any advice? You know, Orthus, it varies from person to person. So, true story, I shouldn't admit this, but I'm always honest with you guys. Aside from a few moments ago when I held it in my hand, and aside from last Wednesday when I held it in my hand on this same show, I have not actually taken a picture with a real camera, or actually one of these, in just under 2 weeks, about 12 days. Okay? That's a really long time for me. Really long time and extremely unusual. But I'm getting antsy about wanting to get back and shoot, but I'm really not overly stressed about it in the sense that I have been working during that 12 days on putting together new photography classes. I've actually got a couple of videos in the works. So I've still been very, very engaged photographically. So I think, Orthus, honestly, you kind of have to just really be honest with yourself about what interests you, what's your tolerance, what you can do, what you can't do. If you find yourself that you're getting antsy that you haven't picked up a camera, and obviously I heard, you normally shoot people, you shoot portraits, right? Then I would say it's going to be better to at least pick the camera up and at least dabble and play shooting insects than shooting nothing, right? If you're just kind of worried, well, am I doing the wrong thing, but I haven't been feeling like I'm missing it, then, just enjoy the break, because, taking a week or a couple of weeks off, you're not going to forget everything you know. You pick the camera up again, it actually can make things a little bit more, like, I'm actually, one of the biggest reasons I'm looking forward to getting back to real shooting with models and all that, it's been such a long time. I mean, for me, it's just over 3 months, right? So actually, no, more than 3. I'm coming up on 4 months. So what's exciting to me is that I'm not worried about can I do it. I'm really looking forward to the idea that I know I'm going to see things very differently. And I'm already kind of gearing up my mindset that when I get back in, anything that was a normal go-to for me before in terms of choices, color choices, whatever, gone. In fact, part of moving my studio and resetting the new studio here, all of my materials and all the little things like that I would use to drape around models and that, I got rid of all of it. So like right now, today, I have nothing here. Nothing. I got rid of it. So, once it's actually a little bit safer, I'm going to start heading back out to the fabric stores and to the craft stores and picking up all new stuff, just because I'm actually looking forward to the idea of kind of having that reset. So it's a little different for everybody, ultimately. But, yeah, so you kind of got to go with what works for you. I know that's not super specific, but, that would be my advice. Okay. Let's see here. So I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything in these super chats. You guys, the super chats are awesome. Thank you. So last two things, because I'm over time. Shocker, right? I ran over. Life's beautiful. Just wanted to pass on to everyone. Be careful when ordering SanDisk cards from third-party sellers on Amazon. Yeah. That's been an ongoing problem for a while, unfortunately. Life's beautiful. The SanDisk thing. I've seen articles actually on like Petapixel and DIYphotography.net. So yeah, unfortunately, pretty much all that stuff you have to be careful. As far as my cards, photography by Sturkis, I religiously use Delkin cards. I wouldn't touch anything but Delkin cards. Like in my camera right now is a Delkin Power. There's the label, by the way, that you're looking at on that card. It's actually green, not gray, but I'm keying for a green screen. That's why the color's going. Okay. Yeah, I only use Delkin. And full disclosure, I am sponsored by Delkin, but I have purchased every one of my cards. They were not given to me. Okay. So by being sponsored, I make a little money by generating some content for them. So but I purchased my cards. So they're definitely my go-to. D-Mac, what size umbrellas do you have behind me? So they are actually not umbrellas. Well, I mean, no, sorry. They're not actually behind me. I'm sitting in front of a green screen. However, that is my umbrella. I took the pictures to include it. They're both the same. They're at different distances. It is a 72-inch umbrella. It's huge. I got it on like a flash sale at Amazon. It's one of their like Flashpoint umbrellas. Not Amazon, excuse me, Adorama. One of their Flashpoint umbrellas, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So it was really cheap. I've never used it except for this picture. Right, that's it. So, but it was so cheap. I was like, oh, for that price, I gotta get it. Like, it's just a habit. I've literally never used it. When I was doing TOGCHAT briefly at the studio in the Cigar Factory building, you guys actually saw it real time there. It was in the background for a few shots, but yeah. So, all right, gang. Good conversation again. A couple of you guys, I was a little tough on you, I know, but seriously, I want you to think. This is great photography is a thinking man's game, right? I mean, that's how you're gonna make it work. And you know, I get it that it's hard for some people, so I'm not trying to be a smart ass about it, but stop worrying about being right or being wrong. Let yourself fail. If you want to get good at your photography, you have to fail. And I don't mean fail by Joe's standards or somebody else's standards or the standards of somebody you read on the internet. I mean your standards. Part of learning photography and part of developing your photography skills is taking the time and putting in the effort to look at your work and critiquing your own work objectively. Okay? Always looking for ways and feeling like you have the ability to improve and want to improve. That's what it takes. Okay? All right, gang. Again, thank you so much for spending a Wednesday evening with me. Hopefully I will see some of you tomorrow night in the Powerful Gels webinar. Don't forget the prep webinars coming up in August. And of course, as always, gang, you know the drill. Remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.